Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV. I'm your host, Jeff Charles. Socialism seems to be all the rage with today's youth in America. Over the past few years, young people have taken to wearing shirts emblazoned with the face of Che Guevara, a racist, homophobic mass murderer responsible for the deaths of countless Black Cubans. To understand this odd trend, I'm speaking with Liberty Nation's national columnist, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to be here, Jeff.
It's always a pleasure.
It's always my pleasure.
Exactly. And so you recently wrote an article for Liberty Nation that was discussing the left's love affair with Che Guevara. Can you explain this trend?
I think I can. I knew nothing about Che Guevara from any kind of history books until I got to college. And when I studied world history, that's where I literally was obsessed with knowing more about him. So, and I'm as libertarian as you can probably be, and he intrigued me. And I think what we're seeing here is they don't dig deep. Socialism, they're not digging deep. At least the American kids, they don't dig deep. They're not going into where he came from. That was then. This is our fight now. But let's take a look at Che Guevara. He was middle class. He grew up middle class. He went to a regular, decent school, which in Venezuela might have been a little iffy back in the day. But he was a physician, and when he got out of medical school, he went on a road trip, and that road trip opened his eyes to the poor people, the poor nations, the poor governments, and so that was his drive to do something better. And so in effect, he left his future and regrouped. Keep in mind, this is a 23, 24-year-old man. Mm-hmm. And he toured all over South America to see what was going on. And that's what prompted him to seek out Fidel and Raul Castro and start that uprising of the Batista government. They wanted them out, and they wanted to install communism or socialism. And when you look at the guy, he's ruggedly handsome. Well, he was ruggedly handsome, and he died at 36. So you have youth sacrificing their life when they could have had a cushy living. And I think that's what we see the young people of America embracing is that. Not, they don't want to talk about how many people he killed or that he rounded up gay people and put them in labor camps.
Yeah, and that actually makes sense. I mean, especially because Americans, we always like the underdog, right? And we always like the heroic type. So, I mean, these young people, they know about all of the appealing traits of his story. But here's my thing. It only takes a few minutes of research to find out the horrible things that he did. I mean, he hated members of the LGBT community and Black people, and he hated them so much that he had no problem brutally executing them. But these young lefties, they pride themselves on opposing bigotry. So how is it that they don't see the contradiction? Why do you think that they're still honoring him despite these things?
Honestly, Jeff, I think sometimes we will overlook things that our forefathers did 50, 60 years ago, the words that were used to describe people, the racial epithets that are hurtful, and we've all learned from that, and we've all regrouped from that. And, to be a good person these days, you don't want to go back and revisit the words that our grandparents used. They could be hurtful. And so I think what we're seeing today is as often as we say, well, but he didn't really mean it, that was just the words of the time. So what we're seeing today is these young people saying, yeah, but, that was 60 years ago. And what stands out for us today is that he said no injustices and, love is part of revolution, and they embrace all of that. They just don't realize that Che was, he cared about injustice for his own people. He didn't care about it for blacks. He didn't care about it for mulattoes. He didn't care about it, for people that didn't resemble him. He thought gays were deviants. So, those things are never talked about, but that's what they embrace. They embrace the quotes. They don't go deeper than the quotes. And he was very articulate.
Yeah, and that is very interesting, because I think we all have that tendency to kind of overlook certain flaws if we believe that the person was overall a force for good, like with Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, he was a philanderer, but what he accomplished with the civil rights movement changed the nation. So I can see why some people would do that, although it would be hard for me to reconcile that if Martin Luther King also led the brutal murders of tons of people. But I get what you're saying there. So here's another question. Polls have been showing over the past few years that younger people have become a lot more amenable to socialist ideas and even more suspicious of capitalism. How do you think that this trend might impact the country later on?
I think if something isn't done to put this trend of socialism where it belongs, and that is the youth of our nation. And, they used to say, well, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, then you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative in your 30s, then you have no brain. And I think that, I think it's fine. Let's let them spread their wings. But what we see, especially in America, is the older adults pushing this. We have, the universities and we have, the drive-by media that continually pump the capitalism is bad. Capitalism is bad. And yet they're capitalists. The media is. They want the almighty dollar. So it's a mixed message. And if you're susceptible to that message, and if that's what you believe at 18 and you're getting it pounded in your head, I don't really think it's going to go anywhere until we see a conservative libertarian youth movement that, doesn't scare the hell out of people and say, oh, they're just neo-Nazis. No, they can be long-haired and riding skateboards and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, but still be fiscally conservative and morally conservative. You don't just go kill people because you're mad. You just don't do that. Che Guevara did that. I mean, he killed people indiscriminately because he didn't want to take the time in some cases to find out who was really innocent and who was really guilty. And that's, I think, is what we're seeing with Antifa and a lot of the BLM movement that gets interrupted by the distractors of the movement or the detractors of the movement. They start knocking windows out and setting fires and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and it ruins that movement. It ruins that. Let's get behind this. Let's make things better for everybody. It ruins it for the rest of us who are going, batten down the hatches. I don't need my house set on fire. So I think that's what, we're experiencing today. We just don't have a handle on it and a place to put it. It just needs to be down. It needs to be tamped down.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and I do think that, like you said, the conservative movement needs to find a way to reach these kids with an effective message. But that's it for this edition of Liberty Nation TV. Remember to hit Liberty Nation News for original articles, the Uprising and Rabbit Hole podcast, and our signature television program, The Conservative 5. Just go to libertynation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Sarah. And this program is a production of libertynation.com, conservative news where truth matters.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.